My name is Lydia Snow. I'm 35 years old, and until that Saturday night, I honestly thought my marriage was going through a rough season instead of dying in slow motion. My husband, Brandon Cole, was 33. We'd been married for 6 years, together for almost 9. No kids, a rented townhouse in Nashville, Tennessee, 2 decent careers, shared bills, shared holidays, shared grocery lists, shared routines so ordinary that people assumed we were stable. From the outside, we looked like one of those couples who had already figured life out. We hadn't. I worked operations for a medical supply company. Brandon worked as an event coordinator for a hospitality group downtown. Busy schedules were normal for us. Late nights weren't unusual either. What changed was Brandon. Every conversation started feeling like I was accidentally stepping on glass. What time will you be home? Why are you checking on me? Do we still have dinner with Paige tomorrow? Why do you always need updates? Did you eat yet? Stop acting like I owe you a report every hour. At first I thought he was stressed, burned out, maybe overwhelmed with work. So I adjusted myself around his moods the way women in long relationships sometimes do without realizing it. I became quieter, softer, easier. I stopped asking questions because every answer somehow turned into an accusation against me. But distance has weight to it. Even silence starts sounding suspicious when it hangs in the same room long enough. The night everything finally cracked open was a Saturday. Brandon told me he was going to his sister Paige's place in Franklin for wine, takeout, and sibling therapy because Paige had apparently had a terrible week. He left around 6:30. Wearing dark jeans, polished boots, and a charcoal jacket that looked too expensive and too intentional for a casual night eating noodles on someone's couch. I noticed it, and I ignored it. That was the thing about marriage near the end. You start swallowing instincts just to avoid hearing yourself sound paranoid. At 8:15, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my friend Lauren. Attached was a photo. Brandon stood beneath the glowing rooftop lights of the Ashbury Hotel downtown, leaning close to a woman in a fitted black dress. Her hand rested lightly against his chest. His face was tilted toward hers in a way I recognized instantly. Comfortable. Intimate. Practiced. The woman was Vanessa Reed, his regional director. The same Vanessa he once described to me as boring, cold, and basically married to her job. Lauren's message underneath read, "Lydia, I'm so sorry. I think you need to see this." I stared at the image for almost a full minute. Not crying. Not screaming. Just cold. Like my body understood something before my mind caught up. I texted Brandon once. Thought Paige needed family time tonight? No answer. Then I called Paige. She answered on the second ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, Lydia. Is Brandon there?" A pause. "What? No." I stared at my windshield. "He told me he was with you." Another silence. Then confusion entered her voice for real. Why would he say that? That was enough. I grabbed my keys. The drive downtown felt strangely calm. Nashville traffic blurred around me, while my thoughts narrowed into one ugly possibility I kept trying not to fully believe. Maybe it looked worse than it was. Maybe Lauren caught a weird angle. Maybe Brandon would explain everything. But deep down, some part of me already knew. Women don't place their hands on married men like that. Accidentally. I parked across from the Ashbury a little after 10 and waited. At 10:41, Brandon walked out beneath the valet lights beside Vanessa, and suddenly every excuse inside me died quietly at once. She touched the sleeve of his jacket while laughing at something he said. He adjusted the small purse hanging from her shoulder like he'd done it before. Familiar movements, natural ones. Not new. Not awkward. Not guilty enough. I got out of my car. Brandon saw me first. The color disappeared from his face so fast it almost looked painful. Vanessa looked between us once and immediately stepped backward. Then I watched realization hit her too. Because Brandon had clearly lied to both of us. She muttered something under her breath about not being involved in this and disappeared back inside the hotel without another word. Cowardly. Convenient. Then it was just me and my husband standing beneath hotel lights while strangers pretended not to stare. "Lydia," Brandon started quickly, "listen." I held up my hand. "Don't." And something in my voice must have scared him, because he immediately became defensive instead of apologetic. "It was only one night," he snapped. "Stop acting like I cheated on you." I actually laughed. Just once. A short, empty sound. Then I said, "You did." His jaw tightened. Suddenly, words started flying at me, like he'd rehearsed them already. "You've been distant. You stopped seeing me. I felt invisible. We haven't been okay for months. This didn't even mean anything." That part almost impressed me. How quickly cheaters rewrite pain into justification. Like betrayal only counts if the victim stays loud enough to interrupt the excuses. "You lied to me," I said quietly. Brandon rubbed both hands through his hair aggressively. "I didn't know how to talk to you anymore." "No," I replied. "You didn't know how to tell the truth anymore." That landed. I saw it in his face immediately. For 1 second, guilt finally appeared. Then he ruined it. "If you walk away right now," he said coldly, "you're the one destroying this marriage." That sentence changed everything. Not the affair. Not the hotel. Not Vanessa. That sentence. Because suddenly I understood something terrifying. He wasn't sorry about hurting me. He was scared about consequences. So I stopped arguing. Stopped trying. Stopped searching his face for pieces of the man I married. I turned around, got back into my car, and locked the doors. Brandon followed me immediately. He knocked on the window hard enough to make me flinch. "Lydia, come on. We need to talk like adults." I lowered the window barely an inch. "We'll talk through attorneys." His entire expression changed. Panic finally arrived. "Wait, seriously? Lydia, don't do this." But I already rolled the window back up. Then I drove to the far corner of the parking lot, opened my laptop, and emailed the first divorce attorney my coworker once recommended after her own marriage exploded. Subject line: "Need consultation ASAP. Husband admitted affair tonight." That email was the real ending. Not the fight. Not the confession. The email. Because action kills denial. Brandon called me 11 times before I even left the parking lot. Paige called 3. I ignored both of them. When I got home, I screenshotted texts, downloaded financial statements, saved security footage, and locked important documents inside the hallway closet. I moved through the townhouse like someone preparing for a storm, instead of grieving a marriage. Brandon came home a little after midnight. This version of him was crying. Suddenly, it was a mistake. Alcohol. Bad judgment. Loneliness. Confusion. "It was only physical," he whispered, like that somehow reduced the damage. I stared at him for a long moment before saying, "The guest room is yours tonight." His expression hardened immediately. "You can't exile your husband from his own bedroom." "I'm not exiling you," I said calmly. "I'm refusing to sleep beside you." Then I shut the bedroom door in his face for the first time in our marriage. I barely slept. Not because I was unsure. Because clarity hurts more than confusion sometimes. By noon the next day, I had opened a separate checking account, completed an STI panel, met with the attorney who answered my email, and informed both families before Brandon could rewrite history first. That mattered. Because people who cheat rarely stop at cheating. They narrate. They edit. They recruit. So I sent one calm message to both sides of the family. "Brandon admitted last night that he had an affair with someone from work. I have begun the divorce process. Please do not contact me attempting to change my mind. This is not a misunderstanding." 3 minutes later, Paige called, sobbing. "You didn't need to humiliate him like that." Humiliate. Interesting choice of word. Not betray. Not deceive. Not sleep with another woman while your wife thinks you're comforting your sister. Humiliate. That was when I realized the next phase wouldn't be remorse. It would be damage control. Brandon spent the rest of Sunday cycling between crying, blaming me, begging for another chance, accusing me of abandoning him, and insisting I secretly wanted an excuse to leave. By Monday morning, he packed a bag and went to stay with Paige for space. Honestly, I was relieved. What I needed now wasn't conversation. It was distance. Paperwork. Evidence. Silence. My attorney's retainer fee was $4,200. Painful. Still cheaper than rebuilding trust with someone who treated honesty like an inconvenience. And somehow, underneath all the devastation, one terrifying truth kept circling quietly in my mind. The man I saw beneath those hotel lights wasn't a stranger. He was Brandon, which meant maybe this version of him had been there longer than I ever realized. The first week after Brandon moved out felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow. Like the townhouse itself was waiting for another argument to start. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with another excuse or another emotional speech about how complicated marriage was supposed to be. Instead, Brandon found new people to speak for him. Paige became the first. She called Monday night around 9 while I was sitting on the kitchen floor eating takeout straight from the carton because I still hadn't fully adjusted to cooking for one person again. Her voice already sounded irritated before she even spoke. "Brandon isn't eating," she said immediately. "He barely sleeps. He's completely falling apart." I stayed quiet. Then she sighed dramatically. "Come on, Lydia. 6 years together and you're really throwing everything away over one mistake?" One mistake. Not months of lying. Not fake family nights. Not hotel rooftops and practiced intimacy with another woman. One mistake. I leaned back against the cabinet and closed my eyes. "Support your brother all you want," I said calmly. "But don't call me and reduce what he did so you can feel better about defending him." Paige went silent for 2 seconds. Then angry. "You're acting cold." "I'm acting divorced." She hung up on me after that. The second flying monkey arrived the next morning. Kelsey, Brandon's best friend since college. She texted me from an unknown number because I had already blocked her regular one during the first night of chaos. "Marriage is complicated. If Brandon is willing to fight for this, the least you could do is meet him halfway." I stared at the message while standing in line for coffee before work. Then I replied once. "Brandon already met Vanessa halfway. That seems to be the problem." Blocked. What surprised me most wasn't the affair anymore. It was how desperately everyone wanted me to absorb it quietly, so Brandon wouldn't have to fully experience the consequences of what he'd done. Like, my role as the wife somehow still included emotional caregiving after betrayal. Brandon himself became harder to avoid because legal separation requires logistics. My attorney advised me to keep every conversation brief, emotionless, and entirely in writing. So when Brandon sent paragraphs, I answered with sentences. "I need my work laptop. Thursday at 6 p.m. Can we please talk for 10 minutes? No. Do you really want to destroy our life like this? You destroyed it. I'm ending it." Those short responses drove him insane. I could feel it through the screen. He wanted emotional access again. Anger, tears, anything that proved he still had influence over me. Instead, I treated him like paperwork. Thursday evening, he arrived at the townhouse exactly at 6, wearing the oversized gray sweatshirt he used to wear during our first years together whenever he wanted to look harmless and soft. For one dangerous second, nostalgia hit me so hard I almost hated myself for it. Because memory is cruel that way. It doesn't erase betrayal immediately. It keeps showing you older versions of the person while you're trying to survive the current one. I had already packed his things into 2 boxes near the kitchen island. Laptop, medication, watches, chargers, toiletries. Brandon walked in slowly, looking around like someone entering a museum of his own mistakes. "You changed the candles," he said quietly. I glanced toward the living room. "Because the old ones smelled like you." That hurt him. "Good." He stood there holding the box for almost a full minute before trying a completely different strategy. "Vanessa might be pregnant." The words landed heavily between us. Not because I believed him. Because I instantly recognized manipulation disguised as vulnerability. I folded my arms slowly. "We haven't slept together in almost 2 months." That was true. The final stretch of our marriage had become excuse after excuse from him. Long nights, stress, exhaustion, distance. Brandon looked away immediately. Maybe she's wrong, he muttered quickly. Maybe it's stress. I nodded toward the boxes. Then your lawyer can update mine when you know for sure. His eyes snapped back to mine. Cold. Flat. Disconnected. And I think that scared him more than screaming would have. Because Brandon still believed emotions gave him leverage. The problem was, I had already crossed into something quieter than rage. Detachment. He left 5 minutes later. The next morning, flowers arrived at my office. Huge arrangement. White lilies. The attached card read, "For my wife. Please don't throw us away. Love, Brandon." My receptionist, Dana, looked at the flowers, then at my face. I'm guessing this isn't romantic. I took a picture of the card for documentation purposes and sighed. No, it's evidence. Dana immediately understood. Want me to call security? Please. That same afternoon, I received a message from Jordan, one of Brandon's coworkers I'd met a few times at company parties. His message read, "Hey, I feel weird saying this, but Brandon's telling people you two were basically separated before the affair happened." I actually laughed out loud in my office. Separated. Interesting revisionist history from the man who texted me, "Love you, be home late," 40 minutes before climbing into a hotel elevator with another woman. I screenshotted the message from that night and sent it directly to Jordan. Brandon's text read, "Heading to Pages for wine night, love you." Jordan replied almost immediately. Wow. That was the first moment I realized Brandon wasn't just defending himself emotionally. He was actively rewriting reality. Unexpectedly, the next major shift came from his mother. Denise called Saturday morning. Not crying. Not defensive. Calm. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said, "and don't protect Brandon's feelings." So I told her everything. Lauren's photo. Paige unknowingly exposing the lie. The Ashbury rooftop. Vanessa. The parking lot. Brandon insisting it wasn't cheating. The long silence afterward felt heavy. Finally, Denise exhaled slowly. "He told me you followed him because you were paranoid." "I followed a lie," I replied quietly. "There's a difference." Another silence. Then she surprised me completely. "I'm not asking you to come to any family meetings," she said. "I won't force you to sit through performances." Performances. Interesting word choice. It meant she already understood exactly what her son was doing. When the call ended, I sat at my desk, staring at nothing for several minutes. Because losing Brandon's mother too had secretly terrified me. Denise had been in my life almost a decade. Hearing disappointment in her voice hurt in a completely different way. But it also confirmed something important. Brandon was starting to lose control of the audience. By the end of that first week, exhaustion finally settled into my bones. Not dramatic exhaustion. The quieter kind. The kind that makes brushing your hair feel like a task. Still, something strange started happening underneath all the grief. I could breathe again. Not fully, but more than before. I started running in the mornings again for the first time in almost a year. Long, silent runs through Nashville neighborhoods before sunrise, while my headphones played music loud enough to drown out overthinking. I started sleeping through entire nights occasionally. At work, my director noticed the change almost immediately. 2 Fridays later, he called me into his office and offered me a regional supervisor position. $11,000 raise. Better benefits. More responsibility. I accepted on the spot. Meanwhile, Brandon's social media transformed into a public grieving performance. Black and white quotes about abandonment. Posts about loyalty. Sad song lyrics. One caption actually read, "Some people leave instead of fighting for love." I stared at that sentence for a full minute before finally laughing to myself. Because cheating really does create alternate universes inside certain people's heads. In Brandon's version of reality, I had become the villain for refusing to quietly survive his betrayal. And the more I refused emotional access, the more desperate he became to regain control. I didn't fully understand it yet, But the next stage wasn't going to be sadness. It was going to be escalation. 3 weeks after Brandon moved out, the situation stopped feeling like a divorce and started feeling like containment. The first real escalation happened on a Wednesday afternoon while I was sitting in a budgeting meeting at work, pretending to pay attention to quarterly projections. My phone buzzed once with a doorbell notification. At first, I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and something cold settled immediately in my stomach. I opened the app beneath the conference table. There was Brandon, baseball cap, dark sunglasses, trying very hard to look casual while punching the garage keypad code like he still belonged there. Behind him stood his cousin Marissa, carrying an oversized tote bag. I stared at the screen in disbelief as they walked inside my townhouse together. 11 minutes. That was how long they stayed. 11 minutes that completely changed the tone of everything afterward. I drove home immediately after work. At first glance, nothing looked disturbed. Kitchen untouched. Living room clean. Bedroom doors closed. Then I noticed the hallway closet. The top shelf sat slightly crooked. Inside, 2 things were missing. My grandfather's watch, and the blue accordion folder holding printed bank statements, screenshots, financial records, and the preliminary divorce documents my attorney had prepared. The watch hurt emotionally. The folder terrified me strategically. Because suddenly, this wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was evidence removal. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch and forced myself not to panic. Then I called my attorney first. Police second. The responding officer watched the doorbell footage twice before speaking. You already requested no unannounced visits? Yes. And he's aware attorneys are involved? Yes. The officer nodded grimly. Change the code tonight. Document everything. Keep communication written only. I barely slept again that night. Not because I missed Brandon. Because for the first time, I realized he might actually become dangerous when he lost control. I changed every password I owned before sunrise. 2 days later, Brandon's attorney emailed mine, claiming the watch and folder had been accidentally collected during retrieval of marital items. Accidentally. The folder returned, missing 3 pages. Unfortunately for Brandon, I had digital backups of everything already stored in encrypted cloud folders. Still, the message behind the theft mattered more than the documents themselves. He wanted access. He wanted leverage. He wanted to know what I had. That same week, my phone lit up at 1:12 in the morning. A single image message from Brandon. Positive pregnancy test. No caption. No explanation. Just the photograph. I stared at it in the darkness of my bedroom, feeling absolutely nothing anymore except exhaustion. Then I forwarded it directly to my lawyer and rolled back over. By noon, Brandon had sent 6 additional messages. I guess I'll handle this alone. I never thought you'd become this cruel. You were supposed to fight for me. Fight for him. As if fidelity had somehow been my responsibility to maintain for both of us. I didn't answer any of it. That silence enraged him more than insults ever could. The office incident happened the following Thursday. Around 4 in the afternoon, Dana called my extension, sounding deeply uncomfortable. Your husband is downstairs. Ex-husband, I corrected automatically. A pause. He brought pastries. Of course he did. Brandon had always believed appearances softened consequences. Flowers. Pastries. Public vulnerability. He treated manipulation like romance, wearing better clothes. What exactly does he want? Dana lowered her voice. He says he just wants 5 minutes. I looked through the glass wall of my office toward the lobby downstairs. Even from that distance, I recognized the bakery box sitting beside him. Chocolate croissants. My favorite. Or at least they used to be. Please ask security to escort him out, I said calmly. Unfortunately, Brandon overheard her. His face snapped upward immediately toward the second-floor offices. Seriously? He yelled, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. You're hiding behind receptionists now? Every head in the building turned. Dana looked mortified. I stayed perfectly still. Call security, I repeated. The scene downstairs escalated fast after that. Brandon started pacing near the entrance, while insisting I owed him a conversation after everything we shared together. By the time security arrived, he had already turned the lobby into emotional theater. The pastries stayed behind after they escorted him outside. Dana looked at the box carefully. "What do you want me to do with these?" "Trash." She nodded immediately. That night, my attorney sent Brandon a formal cease and desist letter regarding the unwanted visits, gifts, repeated contact, unauthorized entry into the townhouse, and late-night harassment. Brandon completely lost his mind afterward. Paige called first. "You're seriously threatening him legally now?" "I'm protecting myself legally." "He's hurting, Lydia. He's trespassing." Kelsey called next. Then Marissa. Every conversation sounded identical. "You're being cruel. You're punishing him. You're making this uglier than it needs to be." No. Brandon was making it uglier because he couldn't accept that apologies do not erase consequences. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Something good. I met Ethan Parker through a running club friend. He was a physical therapist, with dark hair, steady eyes, and the kind of calm energy that immediately lowers your nervous system without you realizing it. Our first conversation lasted almost 40 minutes after a group run downtown. No flirting at first. Just easy conversation. Comfortable silence. Normalcy. And after months of emotional chaos, normal felt almost suspicious. We got coffee the next weekend. Then dinner, after another run the week after that. I told him the truth immediately because I had no interest in building anything on hidden damage. "I'm in the middle of a divorce," I admitted, while stirring iced coffee with unnecessary focus. Ethan nodded once. "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Then he smiled gently. "I'm glad you got out." That simple sentence nearly broke me emotionally, right there in the cafe. Because he didn't ask what I did wrong, didn't suggest forgiveness, didn't tell me marriage was complicated. He just acknowledged reality. Of course, Brandon found out eventually. People always do. 2 Sundays later, Ethan and I were sitting outside at a restaurant in Germantown halfway through appetizers when I heard Brandon's voice behind me. Wow. Every muscle in my body tightened instantly. I turned slowly. There he stood beside our table, looking furious and wrecked at the same time. His eyes moved from me to Ethan and back again. "So this is why you moved on so fast." Ethan stayed seated, but alert. "Calm." "Brandon," I said quietly, "leave." Instead, he laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable. Months together and you're already replacing me." "Actually," Ethan said evenly, "I think she's just having dinner." That pushed Brandon over the edge. He grabbed the water glass beside my plate and slammed it back onto the table, hard enough for water to explode across the surface and splash into Ethan's lap. Not a full throw. Just enough aggression to create a scene while still pretending innocence afterward. Several nearby tables turned immediately. The manager rushed over. And then Brandon did something almost fascinating. He started crying. Right there in the middle of the restaurant. "She's replacing me before the divorce is even final," he said, loudly enough for strangers to hear. The manager asked him to leave. He refused. Security got involved again. As Brandon was escorted away, he kept staring directly at me, with this expression I still struggle to describe even now. Not heartbreak. Ownership. Like he genuinely believed my emotional life still belonged to him, despite everything he'd done. That night, my attorney finally said the words I'd been avoiding. "I think we should file for a protective order." And honestly, I agreed immediately. Because by then, the pattern was undeniable. The break-in. The stolen documents. The workplace scene. The gifts. The harassment. The restaurant confrontation. This wasn't grief anymore. It was escalation. Meanwhile, Brandon's life outside our marriage was starting to collapse too. Jordan told me Vanessa had quietly resigned after multiple workplace complaints involving favoritism and inappropriate conduct. Then, Denise called one evening, sounding exhausted. "Your husband is telling relatives you emotionally abused him for years," she said flatly. I closed my eyes slowly. Of course he was. Denise sighed heavily before continuing. He's trying to build a ladder out of lies because he doesn't like the ground he's standing on. That sentence stayed with me, because it was exactly right. Brandon didn't actually want forgiveness. He wanted narrative control. And the more reality cornered him, the more unstable he became trying to escape it. The hearing for the protective order happened on a Tuesday morning, almost 3 months after the night outside the Ashbury Hotel. By then, I barely recognized my own life anymore. Not because it had fallen apart, because it had finally stopped revolving around Brandon's emotional weather. Still, seeing him again that morning made my stomach tighten instinctively. He walked into the courtroom wearing a navy dress shirt with the sleeves carefully rolled, hair neatly styled, expression softened into something calculatedly vulnerable. Minimal sleep, subtle stubble. The exact appearance of a man trying to look wounded instead of unstable. For years, that version of Brandon would have worked on me. That morning, all I saw was strategy. My attorney arrived carrying a thick black binder that looked heavy enough to collapse under its own weight. Evidence. Screenshots. Doorbell footage. Police reports. Messages. Photos. Timeline summaries. The complete anatomy of escalation. Brandon avoided looking directly at me while we waited for the hearing to begin. But every few seconds, I caught him glancing sideways like he still expected me to suddenly soften if he looked sad enough. That was the strange part about people like Brandon. Even after everything, they still think access is inevitable. The hearing itself lasted less than an hour. His attorney opened with what I privately started calling the emotional confusion defense. Yes, mistakes were made, she said carefully. But Mr. Cole was grieving the collapse of his marriage and attempting reconciliation during a deeply emotional period. Attempting reconciliation. Interesting phrase for stalking, trespassing, and harassment. My attorney stood afterward and calmly dismantled the performance piece by piece. He walked the judge through everything chronologically. The hotel confrontation. The repeated unwanted contact. The flower delivery to my workplace. The late-night pregnancy test photo. The unauthorized entry into the townhouse. The removal of financial records. The office disturbance. The restaurant incident involving Ethan. At one point, the judge looked directly at Brandon. Did your wife request distance and communication through attorneys before you entered the residence? Brandon cleared his throat. I was retrieving personal belongings. My attorney immediately slid a printed photograph across the bench. Marissa, carrying the blue accordion folder out of my house. The judge stared at the image for several seconds, then dryly said, "That does not appear to be clothing." For the first time all morning, Brandon visibly lost composure. His face tightened. Eyes dropped. Shoulders stiffened. It wasn't shame. It was realization. The realization that charm had finally failed. The protective order was granted for 1 year. No direct contact. No workplace visits. No third-party harassment. No showing up unexpectedly. All communication strictly through attorneys regarding the divorce. That was the moment Brandon finally cried for real. Actual tears. Shaking hands. Red eyes. And maybe part of him truly was devastated. But I remember sitting there realizing something important at the exact same time. Tears after consequences are not the same thing as remorse before exposure. If I had never gone downtown that night, if Lauren never sent that photo, if Paige had unknowingly covered for him successfully, would Brandon ever have confessed? I already knew the answer. No. The divorce finalized several weeks later. No children made everything cleaner. Not painless. Cleaner. We each kept our retirement accounts. The joint savings got split after reimbursement calculations showed Brandon had spent over $3,000 from shared accounts during his conference weekends. Vanessa, apparently, had expensive taste in hotels. Brandon kept his SUV and its payment. I kept my truck, my tools, and most of the furniture I had purchased before the marriage. When everything ended, the total financial damage to me sat slightly above $9,000 between legal fees, security upgrades, deposits, and attorney retainers. Expensive lesson. Still cheaper than staying married to someone who viewed honesty as optional. Brandon eventually moved into a small apartment near Brentwood after things exploded between him and Paige. Turns out supporting someone emotionally becomes harder once their chaos starts spilling directly into your own house. Kelsey quietly disappeared from social media after months of posting vague quotes about loyalty and forgiveness. Marissa stopped calling entirely. Funny how fast flying monkeys vanish once the original script stops working. The final message I ever received from Denise came 2 days after the divorce decree finalized. I'm sorry for what my son did to your life. Peace looks better on you than stress ever did. I read that text 3 separate times. Because she was right. The house became quieter afterward. Not lonely. Quiet. There's a difference. I stopped checking the doorbell camera constantly. Stopped jumping whenever my phone buzzed unexpectedly. Stopped replaying conversations in my head, searching for hidden meanings. I started cooking again. Real meals. Not survival food eaten over the sink while answering lawyer emails. I started buying fresh flowers for myself, instead of associating them with manipulation. At work, I officially stepped into the supervisor role and realized how much energy I had wasted trying to emotionally stabilize a man committed to destabilizing himself. And Ethan? Ethan stayed steady. That mattered more than romance, honestly. No dramatic declarations. No desperate attachment. No trying to rescue me. Just consistency. Morning runs. Slow dinners. Easy conversations. Healthy silence. The kind of calm that feels suspicious after chaos, until you finally remember calm is what normal relationships are supposed to feel like. We took everything slowly, on purpose. Not because we were afraid. Because neither of us wanted to build something meaningful on top of unresolved wreckage. The strangest part of everything is this. I honestly think Brandon still believes my reaction was the real tragedy. That if I had listened longer, absorbed more blame, protected his image, allowed him enough tears and speeches and chances, then maybe we could have saved the marriage. But cheating never starts at the hotel. That's what people misunderstand. It starts much earlier. In the lies, the contempt, the secrecy, the irritation whenever honesty is expected. The little permissions people quietly give themselves long before they ever touch another person. By the time I saw Brandon standing beneath those valet lights outside the Ashbury, our marriage was already ash. The hotel simply showed me where it had been burning. So here's what I learned. When someone betrays you and immediately starts negotiating the definition of betrayal, leave. When they get caught and focus more on your reaction than their behavior, leave. When their friends and family pressure you to become emotional shelter for the person who shattered your trust, leave harder. Brandon wanted me confused. Guilty. Patient. Available. He wanted forgiveness before honesty. He wanted me to help carry the weight of choices he made alone. I didn't. I chose paperwork. Distance. Evidence. Silence. Boundaries. And eventually, a better life. Honestly, that was the first truly faithful thing anyone had done for me in a very long time.